Welcome to Vantage Point Podcast, a podcast brought to you by NWR Communications and 92 Studio. This podcast is intended for education and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. G'day and welcome to the latest episode of Vantage Point, where we speak with leading minds in Australia behind business and what drives them. Today's episode we have Luke Reid, the CEO of Microba. Microba listed on the ASX some 12 months ago after raising $30 million. It's a biotech company, but with a little bit of a difference. It already has revenue, and it's got two sides of a business, which we'll delve into with Luke shortly. Microba's had significant milestones since it's been listed some 12 months ago, highlighted by Sonic Healthcare, a $17 billion juggernaut, really, and one of the world's leading healthcare companies, investing to take just under 20% of the company. So I'll now ask Luke just a little bit more about the business, and hopefully you enjoy the episode. Microba listed some 12 months ago. It raised $30 million at IPO. Obviously, we've got Luke here, the company's CEO. Ginkgo Bioworks are a cornerstone investor, backed by a number of leading institutions in terms of pre-IPO and in IPO. And of late, obviously, Sonic Healthcare, $17 billion sort of juggernaut in the healthcare space, both in Australia and worldwide. It's a fair resume. Can you just talk to us about how the business sort of came about? It's been a sort of deep research first before products and therapeutics, but fascinated to delve into the sort of origins of the business, University of Queensland and whatnot.
Yeah, the founding of the business is really rooted in deep science and medicine. It dates all the way back to it's a labour of a couple of decades of work from two very talented professors, Professor Phil Hugenholtz and Professor Gene Tyson. They spent a lot of their careers in North America, Berkeley, MIT. Phil was a director at the Joint Genome Institute. Ultimately, we're lucky in Australia that they were attracted back to their roots here to set up a Centre for Excellence in Microbial Genomics, a centre called the Australian Centre for Ecogenomics at the University of Queensland. And it was there that they took all of the work that they'd been doing in measuring and analysing complex microbial ecosystems and put that together into a platform that was the basis of what became Microba. How that opportunity then actually came into fruition about the commercial aspects of Microba was in 2014, they saw a company launch in North America looking to bring microbiome testing to consumers. But they were doing that using antiquated technology, some of the technology that Phil had used in his PhD, and Phil's got many grey hairs if you look at him. And what they were concerned about was that the microbiome represented such an important part of health and an important component of what we would need to unpack to advance healthcare. And this commercial endeavour from these individuals that didn't have any scientific founding in the space, using old technology that wasn't going to be able to deliver the information required to advance the field, were potentially going to risk harming and inhibiting that future commercial opportunity. So they saw that they had a duty to actually take their technology from a research domain at the forefront of this sector and bring it into a commercial sector. So that original first coffee meeting where they saw that opportunity was back in 2014. And then the job at hand was to actually bring that technology down to a price point where we could actually launch a commercial test to bring that information to consumers, clinicians, patients, and other research customers. And that's what happened at the end of 2017 and was then what saw us launch Microba out of the University of Queensland.
And then we just take a bit of a step back in terms of microbiome, gut health. Gut health's obviously been a little bit of a buzzword over the last few years, but what is the microbiome? Why is it so important to gut health? And what sort of insights does it give us?
So when we talk about the microbiome, we are more microbial than we are human. So there's more microbial cells in and on the human body than there are human cells. They are on our skin, they're in our mouth, they're in other parts of our body, but the largest and densest population of those organisms and the ones that have been demonstrated have the most impact on our health is your gut microbiome, the trillions of organisms that live in your gut, which have now been shown to be absolutely essential for maintaining health, but a really critical component of a range of diseases, and in particular in chronic disease. And that's where Microba is focused. And with our ability to very accurately and comprehensively measure those organisms, we're able to pursue what microbiome testing looks like to improve patient management for those chronic conditions, but also discover and develop novel therapies from that complex community of microbes and their interesting and novel biology.
And I spoke at the top in terms of obviously Ginkgo Bioworks, Sonic Healthcare and whatnot. Some might have heard before, but Professor Ian Fraser, the inventor of Gardasil, the cervical cancer vaccine, how did he's an investor in the company and obviously on the board as well. How did he sort of come about in terms of his involvement with the company?
So Ian was a mentor for Phil and Jean. He's got deep roots at the University of Queensland, which was the centrepiece for all of his work with Gardasil and the commercial efforts around that. So he is not only one of Australia's most distinguished clinical scientists, but he is a key figurehead in Queensland and a key mentor to many professors looking to translate their research commercially. So Ian worked really closely with Phil and Jean and was right back at the beginning in the formation of Microba. He was a foundational investor and shareholder. As you said, he's now our deputy chairman and chairs our medical advisory board. What's always really amazing to me is for someone so busy and with so much demand for his time, how much time he spends attributed to Microba. Like, he really believes in what we're doing. He's been one of the biggest advocates for our therapeutic programs and saying we need to move, with the data that we're seeing, we need to move this quickly into patients because through the way that we've discovered them, the safety profile is really compelling. Through the route of how we discover these organisms in our large population data set, they have short-tracked the discovery route, and it enables us to bring them to clinicians and patients faster. And that's been his core driver, is we need to do that. We have an obligation to do that.
And in terms of, again, just sort of stepping back, Microba sort of split into really two divisions in terms of a testing services side and a therapeutic side. If you could just sort of run us through at a high level testing side and how that sort of flows through from a data bank perspective and how you use that in the therapeutics business.
If I go all the way back to 2014, that's where that business model was founded. I sat there at that coffee meeting with Phil and Jean where they were saying there's these companies that are powering ahead to deliver testing services in the microbiome space using old technology. They don't know what they're doing. And as we sat there and thought about what a business looked like to bring this metagenomics technology that they had been developing at the forefront of this space, and how we would bring that to patients and how we would leverage the intellectual property to unpack the healthcare opportunity, we were looking at what 23andMe had achieved in the genomic space. And what 23andMe demonstrating is that you can deliver a testing service that delivers value. You can build a data set, and then you can use that data set to leverage to discover and develop novel therapies. The difference in what we saw with the 23andMe story is it was a very capital-intensive business model in building that testing business. Their objective was to try to disrupt healthcare and making it a really consumer-centric healthcare business. And they also wanted to own the customer in all markets. So for us, we saw an opportunity to actually change up that side of the business and say, well, we are the technology leaders and we should build out core capability in how we translate those testing results into clinically actionable information and information that individuals can use to manage their health. And we should work with partners that already have deep access and channels into market, that have established brand credibility with customers, and also leverage their laboratory networks. What that then leaves us with is something that is very scalable, high margin, and also with a much lower capital intensivity to actually deliver that testing globally. On the therapeutics business, we also have some important differences where because of the nature of the microbiome versus with 23andMe looking at complex genomic information, which leads them to targets, then they then have to drug with standard chemistries or protein-based drugs. What we were able to discover is key organisms and biology that represented drug products themselves that we could then very rapidly move through preclinical development and into human clinical trials. So the cost and speed of moving those therapies has been at a significantly different rate to what pharma traditionally sees.
And could you provide some examples there in terms of A, how long it's taken you, how long it usually takes, B, how much it usually costs, and how much it's cost you?
What we started to initiate off of the back of the first block of data generation from our testing through our large observational study is really in around 2019, we started to define and execute on our therapeutic strategy. So if you fast forward, we're now in 2023. We've gone from 2019 to 2023 to have 3 programs, have multiple lead candidates, and be just weeks away from moving into the clinic. And we've only spent a relatively small amount on developing those assets. And so it preserves really the capital for the clinical phase of development. And that's where you unlock the next phases of value for investors.
Yeah. How you sort of differentiate from other sort of competitors. Obviously, you talked through the life cycle of the testing. Is it more confidence in terms of the outcomes from a clinical setting, or how do you sort of look at that?
So when I look at competitors, we've obviously got the two sides of the business. If I look at services first, what we saw, and it was what Phil and Jean saw back in 2014, is a lot of companies that were looking to go after consumers. What we've really felt was our difference is because of the completeness and the accuracy of our data, that we have the opportunity to work at the forefront to actually define how this testing information can be used in health management in a range of different disease settings and bring this to clinicians and patients. So what we've seen is a lot of companies launch and deliver consumer solutions, and many of those with low bars in terms of evidence and what they're comfortable presenting to individuals, matching that up with a range of different supplements that also have a very low level of evidence. And we've continued to maintain a very high degree of scrutiny in what we put out. And so our differentiation is what we've delivered in a consumer space has had a very high bar of rigor and scientific excellence. But what we've really been focused on for a number of years now is bringing to bear the clinical utility of how microbiome test information can be used in patient management, and ultimately setting the basis for how this can become a routine part of healthcare, like a blood test is today, and a part of your annual checkup, or a part of what you would have tested when you're looking at a chronic gastrointestinal issue or another chronic issue that has a core part of its etiology in the microbiome. And so the companies that we see that are already operating in that space are companies like Genova Diagnostics, and they're actually one of our key partners in delivering our testing into North America. So what they saw when we first connected with them was, we've got a decision to make. Are we going to compete with Microba with their world-leading technology? Or are we going to have to partner with them? And what they resolved is that they will partner.
Microbiome, the gut health, can you sort of talk to what are the sort of real health problems and maybe some sort of examples in terms of key outcomes from tests? You know, I've heard you talk before in terms of whether it's mental health and whatnot, but what and the sort of solutions. Obviously, it's not a one-trick pony that it just solves everything, but the path that it leads a clinician down to advise their patient.
Yeah, so we've got a whole range of really interesting examples of where this has been now deployed clinically. And we've been able to achieve relief for people that have had a chronic condition that has been unresolved through standard of care. And that's the opportunity that we're unlocking there. They exist within people with chronic gastrointestinal issues. And we had a case study recently with an individual that presented with uncontrolled diarrhea that came on very, very suddenly. They went through the standard screening testing together with their general practitioner. They even went through a scoping exercise with a gastroenterologist. What they resolved is that by exclusion, they had irritable bowel syndrome, which meant that they couldn't really define where the issue was. That led them to engage with a dietitian who started to put together a dietary strategy to try and manage the IBS. But they also did microba testing. And what they revealed is a range of out-of-range biomarkers within the microbiome. The dietitian was then able to put together a specific intervention strategy, and they were able to get complete resolution within a very short period of time.
Whereas without that, they're just basically playing a guessing game.
Correct.
Yeah.
If you then look beyond the gut, we had a really interesting case of a lady that had high BMI, and they had a range of mental health concerns. And in particular, they were scoring very high on depression survey. So mental health challenges plus overweight. What was deployed as a part of the treatment strategy for that individual was a complete microbiome assessment together with our testing. What that revealed was actually just a handful of very key out-of-range markers where the clinician was able to put in place a specific intervention strategy to address those markers. Not only did they see a improvement in BMI quite quickly, they were able to bring that mental health scoring result actually back into a normal range. So really striking result showing the systemic action of the gut microbiome and how that can be a really important component of managing these patients with complex chronic conditions.
What sort of, I know how hard you work within the business, but to sort of hear these sort of key outcomes for men and women, what sort of, not vindication is the right word, but satisfaction that all the hard work and the long years.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's absolutely huge.
Because it's not just working in the lab and hoping for the best, right? It's actually hearing real life outcomes with real life people.
Completely.
Yeah.
We surface these good stories at our all hands meetings for the whole company because it's the reason why we're here. It goes back to the roots of that first conversation with Phil and Jean in 2014. The reason why they were compelled to do something and commercialise their metagenomics platform was they were really concerned that the health opportunity here wouldn't be unlocked and they could see the opportunity. So it's a key central part of our motivation, not only on the testing side, but also on the therapeutic side. Going back to your question before about competitors, we see a really interesting and evolving competitive landscape on the therapeutic side as well. But importantly, Microba, again, is operating at the forefront of that space with something that's really differentiated and unique. We've just seen the first 2 FDA-approved microbiome therapies, and they are for donor-derived products, what we think of as first-generation microbiome drugs. We are then now seeing that companies have progressed a range of consortia products, what we think of as second-generation microbiome therapeutics. They're essentially trying to distill why those donor-derived products can actually have efficacy and try to reduce that down to a group of organisms and put them into a capsule that can be orally delivered. What we're able to do with our technology is hone in on the very specific organisms and biology which say, from all the data that we've generated, that you don't need a complex consortia of organisms. You can actually deliver that biology and that activity through a very specific single strain therapeutic. That simplifies the manufacturing, it simplifies the regulatory path, and it also simplifies our way to get down to the key mechanisms of action that deliver that biological efficacy result. So we believe that we're in a really strong position at the right time with this unique intellectual property and now about to move into clinical development.
Most would know, obviously got leading partners around the world, but one that most would know would be Sonic Healthcare. How did that sort of come about? It moved very quickly behind the scenes. What sort of attracted them to Microba, and what does it sort of mean for the future of Microba?
We'd been talking to Sonic for a little while, and they'd been particularly interested in how they might be able to license and deploy our technology as a distribution partner. And last year, coming out of COVID, what we saw is a range of medical diagnostic companies looking for new areas for growth. COVID testing was falling away, and out of the opportunities that they were surveying, microbiome was right up the top. That's seen us, with our partnership with SynLab, accelerate very quickly, and it also bubbled up to be a key opportunity for Sonic. What then happened was we were getting quite deep on what that distribution relationship could look like, and as they looked under the hood, I think what they realised is how far we had progressed, how this testing can be deployed together with healthcare professionals and their patients. And I got a phone call from Chris Wilkes, their CFO, who's been there across the whole journey together with Colin Goldsmith, who said, myself and Colin want to get together with you and have a discussion about whether you would be open to us taking a significant shareholding in Microba. We then had some discussions, very quickly got alignment that they were thinking about the opportunity in the same way as us, that they did see that this was going to become a mainstream part of pathology and testing, and they wanted to be at the forefront of that together with us, and they saw Microba as the technology leaders and partners to do that with. We then very quickly followed through to make sure that we had alignment at a board level. And then myself and Chris on Sonic's side executed that deal within a matter of weeks.
Yes, it was certainly a quick turnaround, which talks again to the validation point that obviously done their due diligence and whatnot, didn't need to see much more. So obviously we talked about the testing side, on the therapeutic side. If you could just run us through the different programs that you're about to run through the clinic. And obviously there's been a number of big transactions in terms of licensing deals and whatnot. Microba's been listed just on 12 months. Is that sort of licensing deal 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the track like most sort of ASX listed companies, or how does that look? It's a long question, but give it a crack.
I would just step back one step and say what we have established on the therapeutic side of our business is really unique, particularly in an ASX listed environment. We have established a genuine platform for drug discovery from the microbiome. We don't have an in-licensed asset or group of assets that we're just capitalising on the ASX and taking through a clinical program. So we have this repeatable, scalable platform which takes our large data set, enables us to find what one of our co-founders calls the needles in the haystack, the key organisms and associated biology that we see consistently in healthy individuals that's missing in different states of disease and represents those therapeutic opportunities. What that reveals to us is that we've already got leads for 18 chronic diseases. We've then had to hone in on 3 very specific areas that have become our focus in inflammatory bowel disease, and in particular ulcerative colitis, in cancer immunotherapy, and in autoimmune diseases. And what we brought on at the time of the IPO last year, as we were really looking to accelerate those programs into the clinic, we brought on a key head of that therapeutics business from Amgen in California. He's been excellent. And he's executed on exactly what we wanted to do, which was from the point of IPO very quickly to move these novel therapies into the clinic. And we're now just weeks away from moving our first lead drug candidate, which we call MAP315, into a first-in-human clinical trial for that inflammatory bowel disease program. In terms of deal opportunities and what that landscape looks like, we only just a couple of weeks ago saw a really significant transaction in the inflammatory bowel disease area, a company called Prometheus that were acquired by Merck. They were acquired for $10.8 billion,
US.
and they were a team of 40 individuals.
Is that right?
Yeah. So what that shows is the demand and appetite for those types of assets and the opportunity that's there just with one of our programs.
And so had they rolled out and they've been successful in terms of in the clinic and had a drug solved, or?
No. What they had delivered was a really great phase 2 data readout, but they still had full phase 3 and market entry ahead of them. They had a great story behind them as well, which actually has a lot of parallels to Microba. So importantly, they got nothing to do with the microbiome, but
the IBD space.
But the IBD space. And they had a data asset and data-driven story, much like Microba, that led them to finding their novel target and ultimately the therapeutic that they developed. And it also enabled them to develop a biomarker strategy, which proved to be important for patient stratification and their clinical success. For Microba, and back to your question on, what time horizon could we think about Microba in terms of therapeutic transaction? We've seen deal examples done preclinical. We've seen deal examples done in phase 1, and we've seen examples for if you hold on and develop those assets through to phase 2 and the value that they can afford. Our job, we've seen, has been bringing top 20 pharma on the journey, looking to put some shape around what deal opportunities could exist early, and then weighing up that opportunity together with shareholders. So we believe that there could be early opportunities to transact and share the risk at an early stage. And then based on that validation on the therapeutics, by doing a big pharma transaction, we could carry some of the other assets, say in our immuno-oncology program, in our autoimmune disease program, further to unlock more value. But
because that's the thing that you're talking about one particular IBD MAP 315. You've got multiple shots on goal, right?
We do.
Yeah,
we
so
do.
It's not a one-trick pony.
And importantly, once we have our first transaction under our belt, we have a repeatable platform. We've got a range of other conditions that we can go after. And really then it's just down to the capital and how aggressive we want to go on that pipeline. And also at that stage, we may find that we have a partner that actually wants to access the whole pipeline.
We might wrap it up with just one sort of final question. Obviously, amazing partners, strong investors, your distribution partners, obviously. In terms of how you run the business as CEO, is it a flat level structure? How do you sort of motivate internally? Is everyone motivated? Just from their sort of origins in terms of University of Queensland being sort of born with it, basically. How do you sort of look at running the business and particularly the change in terms of running a business into an ASX listed business?
We have a fiercely intelligent team. Like I think it would surprise most what we've built. We've already touched on people like Trent Munro, our head of therapeutics from Amgen, Ian Fraser. But there's many more people like that are hidden behind the scenes. Our chief scientific officer, Associate Professor Lutz Krauss, is an internationally renowned expert in the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning applied to complex genomic data sets. He has a strong academic background, but he came to us with a background that's commercial from Nestlé in Switzerland. And there's a range of other people like that throughout the company that don't normally get put up in headlights. But everyone's really intrinsically motivated by the real biology that we see in the microbiome and the opportunity to impact millions of individuals suffering from chronic disease. the way that we have made sure that we actually operationalize effectively and have everyone rowing in the same direction is we've appointed a head of the services business, and we run that as a entire business in its own right. And then we've appointed a head of the therapeutics business, and we've run that business in its own right. And then the intersection and sharing of information between those teams is done in a really specific manner, but make sure that both of those teams are incredibly focused on their job at hand and make sure that we are delivering on our goals.
It's certainly been tangible evidence in terms of what you've achieved over the last 12 months since listing. Well done on what you have achieved, and good luck with the rest. It's a powerful story, as I said, in terms of, it's got a heap of cash, obviously. Post the injection with IPO and then Sonic, there's a number of shots on goal in terms of the therapeutic side. The testing services, a number of leading partners around the world that are just starting to ramp up and get activated. So watch this space. It's going to be a good one to watch. Thanks so much for coming on, Luke.
Thank you, Simon.
Cheers.